Brazil, o pai tá on.
It's a new age for the universe.
I'm not sure if you've been previously informed that in Brazil you have a kind of a nickname. We call you Sny God.
Sny God.
Yeah.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah. A lot of people think very highly of you and your work here. But so they came up with this thing. Yeah, it's really cool. There's an expression in Portuguese which says "O pai tá on."
What is it? Pai. Phonetics. Hilarious. Very good.
Once again, thanks for having this conversation with us.
Excited.
During the first interview that we had with you 2 years ago, the Zack Snyder hub, which at the time was called Snyder Cut Brazil, was just a very humble fan base, and today is the only news hub dedicated to you in the world. So it's a huge honor to have you.
Well, I appreciate it, you guys. I really do. That's
well,
that's
the honor
really cool. It's humbling.
The honor is all ours for sure. First of all, Raquel and Andrea and the other people at the hub would like to know if you enjoyed the gifts that you received during Tudum, the custom flip-flops and the t-shirts.
Always enjoy the gifts. Thank you so much. It's amazing. I'm excited, by the way, to be coming back to Brazil for Comic-Con. Super excited about that. You know, I've never been to Brazil Comic-Con. As you know, it's the biggest Comic-Con in the world now, and the most insane and most intense fans, and just incredible. And Netflix is just going to go completely nuts with its just what it's got planned for that. And I just am super excited to just be back down in Brazil and hanging out.
Yeah. Last time we had the pleasure of talking about the highly anticipated release of the Snyder Cut. Today we'll be talking and focusing on the Armyverse and Rebel Moon and some analyses of said titles. So let's jump into question number 1. With your return to the zombie genre, we're all very anxious to know what to expect next from the Armyverse. During Geeked Week, you said that the temporal loop that the characters in Army of the Dead are involved in could be true. Are we getting more of that in Planet of the Dead? What happened to Dieter and the rest of the characters? And what's up with this shared timeline with Rebel Moon?
So what happened was when we were working on the animated series, which, as you know, has been halted for the time being, although we have the entire thing voice recorded. All the actors have been recorded. All the animatics are done. I mean, essentially, you can watch it only in animatic form. It's just not animated all the way. Well, when we were working on it, Shay and I were talking about, because it's kind of an origin story of how the zombies made it into onto our planet or into our world, and where they come from and what they are. And so in that discussion, and that while we were doing that, we were also working at that time, we were also working on Rebel Moon. And because you can imagine that the origins of the zombie plague are extraterrestrial, and that we were into that concept. And it's not just extraterrestrial, it's sort of almost interdimensional, almost, it's not like they've come in a spaceship to Earth. There's a whole thing that happened, and I'll you know, I have sincere hope that you guys get to see that show, because it's really fun and cool. And so in that working out, there happened to be a way to kind of link up these two universes right now in a very tentative way. But I think, you know, who knows? But I just like the hint. And there's what we discovered is that in Army of the Dead, we discovered that there's a thing called a planet called Xanadu, which has been named by of course, just by the techs at Area 51 when they discovered it. They named it Xanadu because I guess they liked Olivia Newton-John. I'm not 100% sure why they named it Xanadu. But the Xanadites are these like sort of beautiful aliens. They're kind of these blue, beautiful, anyway, they're just these beautiful aliens. And that's where some of the adventures in Army take place is on Xanadu with the Xanadites, and there's a certain Queen Maru that's there that we meet. Now there's a scene in in Rebel Moon where they go to this bar in Providence, which is the town that nearby on Belt. It's the sort of port town, and in the brothel bar, it's really a brothel. There's a Xanadite. We did a makeup of a Xanadite in the bar, and in the director's cut of Rebel Moon, the bartender and the Xanadite have an exchange where they mention Queen Maru, but then they move on to other stuff. So anyway, that's how it manifests itself in Rebel Moon. It's a small piece, but it hints at possibly, you know, I don't know. We thought it was fun. And then what's to come for Army? You know, I love the Army universe. I love the whole thing, and I'm excited and encouraged and very keen to continue those series of movies. So right now, my focus is on Rebel Moon, but certainly I have not left or forgotten about Army, and excited to continue those stories.
That's great news that it's still ongoing, except for being halted.
Yeah, certainly just on a small hiatus.
Which is good. That kind of clears our second question, which was about that, so we can jump ahead. We've noticed that in some of your films, such as Sucker Punch, Army of the Dead, 300, Watchmen, and even Snow, Steam, Iron, you've portrayed sexual predators and always a very violent consequence for them, be it something to do with personal vindication or the desire of any woman who has ever suffered sexual abuse. We saw a glimpse of this too in the latest Rebel Moon trailer. Is there a specific reason to touch upon this?
Yeah, I mean, is there a specific reason? Do I have is there like a mandate or some kind of agenda that I have in relationship to this topic? I don't think so. I mean, you know, I haven't, you know, sat down with a psychiatrist or a therapist to talk about this one, but I just find it, you know, as you know, since the dawn of time, you know, or whatever, there's this imbalance or whatever you want to call it. However, you know, the way that sort of the basic society has been made up is that that shockingly we live inside of this. We can live inside of, even though we're civilized people, and we have huge respect for each other as if we're living a civilized lives, and that all people have self-governance and dignity. That's what we hope for, right? But that inside of that, there's this paradox that if abused, if taken to some sort of animal level, there's this potential for abuse, and that's the thing that I really don't like, and not only don't like, but that I sort of, from a mythological standpoint, I find it important to, in the most basic way, find it important to underline the consequences for that behavior. I don't know if I'm doing it on purpose, but it definitely is a thing I don't like. So,
in Rebel Moon, the story portrays a group of rebels who join forces to fight against a totalitarian and dictatorial regime, or even planet, you would say. Would you say that your films attempt to discuss society in any way?
I mean, I think in the way that iconographically we've all been educated about whether it be imperial, countries or monarchies or kingdoms, whatever they are, and so it seems that history bears out that that the conquest of others can be a sort of morally doesn't really land, and I think that if it's I honestly think that what we did was just the most Napoleonic lessons, and I think that I'm a student of Alexander the Great. I'm a student of Napoleon, and it never really works out 100%. So yeah, that's probably where it comes from, for me. And we needed a template. I'd written this script for Warner Brothers, pretty much right before Army of the Dead. Kurt and I wrote this script called Blood and Ashes, which is about Alexander the Great. We haven't made it yet. I have it. It's about Alexander the Great and his relationship with Hephaestion, and how they, how that relationship evolved during their campaigns, and kind of up to their death, and what they meant to each other when Hephaestion died, and then and what caused Alexander to die. It's all anyway. But in doing that, we did a lot of research, as you can imagine. There's not a small amount of research on something like that. So yeah, so I think that's probably where it comes from.
That's really cool. Really love the Napoleonic reference. Awesome. Yeah, knowing that Rebel Moon was born from a pitch for a potential Star Wars movie, and considering the influences of that saga, as we can see in the trailers, what does Star Wars mean to you, both as a fan and as a director?
Yes, for me, especially the original trilogy has sort of slipped into myth. It's kind of not really a movie anymore for me, especially the first three movies, and I'm a fan of what they're doing, whatever they're doing over there. I think it's cool. But those movies are kind of, to me, they're kind of separate in some ways from what the greater Star Wars sort of IP has become. And so I guess that's what I mean, is that, so I'm more interested in the feeling I got from Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, as far as where it lived in the time it was made and how it was made, and sort of everything that sort of surrounded it for me when I was the age I was when I saw it. So it was really magical and mysterious, and had a lot of qualities of myth. And as you know, that was like right around the time, it's 81 is when Excalibur came out. And so like those two movies, that mythology for me, and as a young man, I was very much influenced by Star Wars and its sort of mythic origins, and then something like Excalibur, and me starting to think about Arthurian legend, and then sort of getting into sort of the Joseph Campbell of it all, and sort of the hero's journey, and that. So that all kind of happened at the same time. So if anything, when you watch Rebel Moon, you'll see like, I think those influences are really strong. And like, and I've said, it's like, it's probably more science fantasy than it is science fiction. It's closer to Lord of the Rings than, say, the creator, you know what I mean? It's not hard sci-fi, like that.
Rebel Moon has humanoid characters, as we were talking about Star Wars, and as happens in that universe. Will their origins remain a mystery, or can
do you mean they're like robots, or the just creatures in general?
Yeah, in general, where you have characters who would be human-like.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, as in Star Wars, will their origins remain a mystery, or can we expect a kind of Fantastic Beasts installment to explain their existence in the Rebel Moon universe?
I think maybe for ones that play a crucial role and are, in this movie, it's kind of because they're sort of, adventuring through the universe. They're not really, and we know what they know, and we kind of are definitely looking at the world from their perspective. And as characters that encounter these kind of creatures all the time, they are, as you can imagine, not terribly, I don't want to say impressed, but not terribly surprised by the existence of, weird creatures. They're pretty unfazed by it. So I think it in that way, we don't learn much about the why of these things. They just are. But certainly in the future, as we go, if some creature needs to be sort of explained or figured out, or its origins need to be fleshed out, we absolutely are happy to do that.
You've mentioned before the idea of making Rebel Moon spin-offs into animation, comics, and games. Is there any chance we get a live action spin-off series?
I mean, it's something we've been talking about, and that would be I think it'd be really fun. So, knock on wood, cross your fingers. It's definitely a possibility. So, it really has a lot to do with, you can imagine the sort of success of Rebel Moon and how it lands on the service and in pop culture. But absolutely would be excited to do something like that. That'd be fun.
Regarding the House of the Blood Axe prequel comic, will that be released in Brazil?
I hope so. Let's make a note.
Yes.
Brazil, please.
We do have a previous history of making stuff happen from an interview, so maybe we can do it again.
Yeah.
So with regard to the Rebel Moon games, is there anything that you can share?
Let me see. I mean, we've talked about, all I'll say about the games is, well, I'll say, the mobile game that we're working on, video game, which hopefully I think is going to get expanded a little bit, but beside that, the guys that worked on the game with us got so into the mythology and sort of, it was so cool and fun to see them really just so hungry and so excited to really just explore every corner. They really, when I would get on the phone with them and talk about it, they were just dorking out so hard. It was great. And they were also just like going, what about, is it possible? And they would ask me all these crazy questions about if we did this and that. And it's cool. So, I mean, I think suffice it to say that they really dug deep into the mythology. We tested each other, and it was actually a really good litmus test for the sort of mythology itself, like whether it holds up to this kind of weird, kind of stretching, and like, can it do this and that, and does that fuck up this and all that stuff. So, it was. I think it's going to be, when you see the game, it's going to be it's fun to like. It's not just a mobile game. It's actually they were really adamant about like figuring out like the greater universe impact of the little story they were telling with their game, and I thought it was really cool. So I think it's gonna be fun. Because we've kind of done this before with the mobile games, and it's kind of like, okay, whatever. But then when I met with these guys, and I guess it's also like what's possible with your phone now is pretty incredible. I was really excited that it wasn't just like a one-off thing, that they had really figured out a way to advance the universe and sort of advance the IP through their game, and not, and I think that's the same. Like Mags did an incredible job. I'm super proud of the comic book, and she did an amazing job writing the comic book. But the and that, you can imagine, was this long and very incredible exchange of ideas, and a lot of working out of the whys and wherefores of the universe, and how the blood axes relate to the Imperium and the Mother World. And again, like I said, excited that we have the opportunity, that those guys took the opportunity to really stretch the IP and really kind of play around, because it was fun to see that. And as a template, going forward, I thought it was a great, that they represented a great sort of relationship between me and what was possible, without trying to break canon, and not trying to reinvent canon. That's the tricky bit.
So next question was actually something that occurred to me last night after watching the trailer. In great works of fantasy and sci-fi, or as you very well put it, sci-fi fantasy, that involve detailed world building, it's very common to have real world cultures influence and inform the aesthetic of the fictional ones. So I mean, when you talk about Lord of the Rings, or
absolutely.
In the case of Rebel Moon, Velt seems like, to some degree, an example of maybe Scandinavian or Nordic influence, not to mention having a character named Gunnar, and you have Ingvar Sigurdsson being cast there as well, which is awesome. Huge fan.
He's so good, by the way. Yeah.
So is this the case? And can you talk about other cultures that influenced the worlds and characters in this universe?
Yeah, I definitely used the sort of Scandi or Scandinavian model for Velt and for the sort of villagers. I felt like that was just a way to sort of represent a isolated sort of culture, and it allowed Korra, to enter that culture, and because of Sophia's natural ethnicity, it made her sort of apart from them, because they were all a bunch of Scandis. They're not, bigoted or prejudiced against her, but she's still an outsider in every way. And so it was really about a way to kind of like draw attention to the difference between them. And also sort of take advantage of that sort of, what I would say is an agrarian culture that is really like, you know, or people of the earth that are, you know, really sort of generationally committed to the harvest and the sort of what they are, you know, as far as a farming community, not, you know, that they have an ancient tradition, you know, I think was really what we were trying to get at. And, you know, just it worked out in that way. And of course, you know, what we tried to do is like in the casting, you know, we, you know, like an example would be like Duna Bay. Once we cast her, once we knew we had Duna, then we let her sort of Korean cultural iconography through research and conversation drive the design so that it culturally like would line up with who the actor was, and sort of say that, you know, each of them would have a, you know, you can imagine that their home planet is kind of like their home country, sort of culturally, not exactly, of course, because it's a space movie, but as a way that we could draw on their own culture to sort of inform what their home world would have looked like. That was kind of how we approached it.
There was an art competition that involved creating a character for Rebel Moon. Will this character be developed, or will he or she be, shall we say, just a guest feature? Is there anything you can share regarding that?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure yet, but sky's the limit right now, as they say. We're not, as we are in, you know, maybe possibly writing a third movie, and or other ancillary, you know, stories and stuff. Who knows what role the character might take? So sky's the limit, as they say right now.
You said once that you use slow motion as a way of creating a painting of a moment with movement. Among the many particular aspects of your films and your unique directorial signature, if you could describe your style as a director and producer, how would you do so?
I guess what I would say is that I have a very sort of intuitive, I take a very intuitive approach to the way I make a movie. I do my best to do the work of analyzing the material before I shoot and in the writing process and stuff like that. And certainly as I'm working, I gain insight. As I'm writing, I gain insight into visually what my intentions will be when I get to the point of shooting. But on the day when I'm filming, and as far as frame rate or exposure and all the things that make up what you see, though I'm heavily influenced by the drawings I do and certain photographers that I like, I do like to kind of, you know, that's the sort of jazz part of it, you know, where that still allows it to be incredibly fresh and insanely intuitive and you know, improvisational in the actual shooting. Is that I really do like to kind of feel it on the day as far as frame rate and all that, because don't forget, a lot of it is incredibly well choreographed. All the fights have been worked out. We know exactly where everyone's going to be. We've built these giant sets. We know everyone knows the blocking is very particular. So when it comes to the actual, like, here's the photographic moment, that's when I try and leave a room at that point for some type of improvisation, some kind of just where you just kind of groove it and feel it and figure out, know where you're going, know where you've been, and just kind of like sort of, you know, use whatever it is as far as your skill set to kind of then in that moment kind of make the shots as you see it. Because I think that that's where I think you come up with sort of unexpected stuff, interesting stuff, the way you kind of shape the scene visually. If you have the sort of wherewithal to know what you want, then you can, that's the moment for the audience to kind of, and you and the audience, because there's like a, you know, they're going to be absorbing this visually and sort of emotionally, and you are, you know, you're kind of, you're playing the instrument in that moment, and it's got to feel, there has to be some quality of, I don't want to say live performance, but some quality of improvisation or some quality of like that. I think that's where the connection happens, you know, as you make the sort of shot making and the realizing of it in the moment has that kind of organic and keeps it fresh and feeling like everyone's experiencing it for the first time together. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of that's the vibe.
Brother, thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you, guys.
And for being so generous, and we'll talk soon.
All right, cheers. We'll see you in Brazil.